Bold and the Beautiful has dropped to 8th place in my rankings. It is free falling downward after getting up to number 2 in December. I thought they had built up the story well. They gave people motivations. And then, in typical Bradley Bell fashion, all squandered by March. It was still in 5th place in February, but I could not keep it high because Bold and the Beautiful, I don't even have a lot to talk about because every single day it's just the same dialogue, the same redundancy. Nothing has truly moved in March. That's the biggest issue for me, is that there has been no real movement in an entire month on this soap opera. So what can I say? You know, Isaiah Hill, you've been commenting a lot on my videos. I appreciate it. And obviously, I know how you feel about Bold and Beautiful these days. And right now, I could agree because I'm struggling to watch it. It was getting good for me because it's such a short episode each day that it's just easy viewing. And I did find that they were building up the story well, but then they just stretched it out because I don't think they actually knew where to go with it. And now we're getting a whole lot of nothing. And I know we're getting the rumor that there's this big twist coming for Bold and the Beautiful. But that could be, I don't know if that's going to be good or bad. So we'll see when that comes. But let's talk a little bit about March. Before we get to the main redundant storyline, let's get to the B story, even though it's more like a C story because it's not good, is that Paris and Carter affair. And suddenly, you know, on this show, after only a couple months, people fall in love, or less. It's a couple weeks on this show and people fall in love. Well, Paris has already fallen in love with Carter, and Carter's fallen in love with Paris, even though this is the only pairing for Carter so far where there's no chemistry, unfortunately. And Paris also has better chemistry with others they've tested her with. So I don't know why, after testing Paris with almost every guy on the show, they pushed her in a relationship with Carter, who she has no chemistry with. Where did that concept come from? Just stupid. And then we got Grace, who still wants them apart. She's trying to blackmail Carter still. And Zende still wants to propose to Paris, even though Paris just fell in love with Carter out of nowhere after being in love with Zende at the beginning of the year. A mess. Poorly written story, if you even want to call it a story. I don't know what it is. It just sucks. So they need to regroup with that mess because it ain't working. And then we have this other stretched out story. The main story. The whole brick. It's just... The problem of why this story now sucks is they just devolved it into the old school Taylor Ridge Brooke triangle. When before that, people actually had motivations, at least somewhat. Although in retrospect, Sela's motivations really should have been against Steffi and not so badly against Brooke. Because at this point in time, it's not making a whole lot of sense why she went so hard after Brooke, but not Steffi, who was the one keeping her from her son this whole time. So, yeah, I mean, I guess this is what happens when everything is so plot-driven. It's hard to keep that momentum because if you start asking why characters are doing this and it's not making sense, the whole story falls apart. And this whole story is unraveled. There's nothing left to it. It's just basically Brooke wants to fight for Ridge, who's now back with Taylor out of nowhere. That's probably why they should have stressed out Taylor just wanting Ridge back and accepting Ridge back like that. Like that. Why? So the one thing that they kind of changed in the story is Thomas basically finding out what Sheila did on New Year's Eve, and the whole alcohol switched with the non-alcohol, and Thomas kind of keeping it a secret for now. But basically, for the past few weeks, Thomas and Sheila have just had the same conversation over and over, much like everybody on this show has had the same conversation over and over. And so we're getting to the point where Steffi overhears Thomas talking on the phone with someone. Steffi follows Thomas and Sheila meet up in an alley. And I haven't watched all of this week's episode, so I'm just going. I think Monday was the last episode I watched. I'm recording this Tuesday. This probably won't air until later in the week. So that's what they've been going with there, is they're, I guess, recreating or going back to the Steffi versus Sheila But the whole triangle between Ridge and Brooke and Taylor, it's all so shallow at their big age. After being so shallow almost the entirety of this triangle, it's just, there's not a whole lot there. All the drama is gone because they sped shit up and it was just too plot driven in the end. Like, that's what happens. And so we celebrated the show's 35th anniversary. So congratulations to the show for making it that far. But the whole anniversary episode, it sucked. Let's be honest, it sucked. Like, it was good in theory, just Brooke and all of her men, or at least most of her men, because it wasn't all of them. And there was no flashbacks of Ron Moss, even though he is Ridge, even though his acting might not be up to par all the time, he was Ridge. So, I don't know. It was just a boring episode. There's not a whole lot to say about it. It was just Brooke dreaming of her guys. It was basically a Brooke love fest. Everybody talking up Brooke. Oh, Brooke is so great. Brooke, you're so great. Vomit inducing. But it did have Eric Thorne, Nick and Bill, and Ridge. Yay. Brooke is great. Yeah, that about sums up the show in March. Not a whole lot to talk about. Not a whole lot moved. We're getting Steffi versus Sheila again after they took time off because Sheila went so far with Brooke instead of Steffi. And that story's ruined, I think. I don't care about it anymore. And the Paris and Carter affair sucks because there's no chemistry and it's pointless. So the entirety of the show right now is falling down or back down to General Hospital and Days of Our Lives levels, even Emmerdale. Emmerdale's boring. And Bold and Beautiful is pretty boring now too because everything's redundant. Nothing's happening and we're just getting the same conversations. So if you're going to do the same conversations, at least move something along better. But then at that same time, they move along the stupid shit like putting Taylor and Riz back together like that. So there's just no balance to this show. It's a mess right now. And not a whole lot more to say. It's in 8th place in my rankings. It sucks because I was enjoying it a few months ago. December and January, I thought it was very entertaining. Even October and November were very entertaining. But that's all been foiled. They need to do more than 2 storylines too. Like, can we get back to some Eric and Quinn shit or something? Give us something, because, yeah, the stories ain't working anymore. And I don't have a lot of hope for the future of these stories either. So I guess we're going to have to see what the big twist is, and I'm assuming that won't be till May at the earliest. So April's looking bleak.